Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. We're going to take a structured, completely impartial, and honestly, a deeply fascinating look into the theology and practice behind the hijab. We'll be drawing directly from our source material to explore not just what it is, but the underlying philosophy of why it's worn and how it's actually practiced all across the globe. So whether you're totally new to this topic or you're just looking to deepen your understanding, we've got a fantastic journey set up for you today. Let's get right into it. Okay, here is our roadmap. We're going to start by defining the hijab, then we'll move into the specific rules and exemptions and tackle the profound purpose of modesty. After that, we'll explore the nuance of culture and the niqab, and finally, look at taking the first step.
So, part 1, defining the hijab, beyond the scarf. There's actually a pretty stark contrast to definitions here. When we hear the word hijab today, our modern understanding immediately jumps to the physical clothing and the head covering worn by Muslim women, right? But if we look at the literal Arabic meaning, hijab actually translates to an extra veil or a barrier placed between two things. Think of it kind of like a curtain. In fact, our source notes that the Quran uses the word hijab to describe a physical partition, like an actual curtain placed between people, rather than the specific garments themselves.
So that begs the question, if the Quran doesn't use the word hijab to mean the headscarf, what word does it use? Well, that brings us to the term khimar. Khimar is the plural form of khimar. Now, back during the time of Prophet Muhammad, the dressing culture already involved women covering their hair with a sheet, but they typically just let the ends fall loosely down their backs. The specific Quranic command regarding the khimar was basically an update to this existing fashion. It instructed women to take that head covering and draw it forward, literally pulling it over their chests to conceal their adornment.
And then right alongside the khimar, we have the jilbab. The jilbab is a loose outer garment or a long piece of cloth that's designed to cover the entire body. So when we use the word hijab in our everyday modern conversational context, what we're actually referring to is the combination of these two specific garments described in the text, the khimar for the head and chest and the jilbab for the body. Together, they make up the complete physical covering. Moving right along to Section 2. Rules and exemptions. How it works.
Okay, so how does this actually play out? The source material, which is derived from Islamic hadith and Quranic texts, outlines 3 primary conditions for this modesty dress code. First up, the requirement to wear the hijab begins when a young woman is old enough to menstruate. Second, the clothing itself has to be thick and non-transparent, so absolutely not see-through. And third, and this is super interesting, the texts actually advise against noise-making shoes, like loud stamping heels. The overarching goal here is simply to avoid drawing any unnecessary attention to hidden adornments.
Well, listen, Muslim women absolutely do not wear these outer garments 24/7. That's a huge misunderstanding. To understand the exemptions to the rule, we first really need to define a crucial Arabic term, and that is mahram. A mahram is a family member with whom marriage is strictly forbidden in Islam, just due to their blood closeness or their familial ties. Pinning down this definition is the absolute key to knowing exactly when the hijab actually comes off.
So there are some very clear boundaries for these exemptions. Muslim women can dress casually and totally remove the headscarf when they are completely alone or when they're around their husbands. They're also totally exempt around their mahrams, which, as we just learned, includes fathers, sons, brothers, nephews, and fathers-in-law. On top of that, the texts note exemptions for specific male attendants who lack physical desire, as well as young children who just aren't yet aware of the private aspects of women. Basically, inside these safe circles, the physical barrier is completely lifted.
Which brings us to Section 3, the purpose of modesty, the why. Now, this is perhaps the single most common question surrounding this entire topic. Our source frames it directly like this: why do women need to cover themselves just because of men? It's a heavy question, right? And it gets right to the very heart of our modern debates around gender and modesty. Let's look at exactly how the theological texts answer this.
The answer fundamentally roots itself in this concept called fitra. Fitra is defined as the innate, natural disposition or self that a person is just born with. According to the theology, God gave humans natural emotions and inclinations, things like attraction and love. And because humans possess this fitra, we are naturally drawn to one another. The texts argue that this innate nature can be channeled into really positive directions like marriage or negative ones. The rules of modesty, therefore, are presented as a safeguard. It's essentially a framework to help manage human nature.
And this brings up a genuinely startling statistic highlighted in our material. Roughly 95% of major social media platforms, ad agencies, and streaming algorithms are owned and driven by men.
Think about that for a second. The source argues that society frequently uses the female image to attract viewers and literally sell products, which leads to some really deep objectification. The Islamic texts offer a sort of two-step solution to this dynamic. First, commanding men to lower their gaze, and second, commanding women to cover, thereby completely removing themselves from being objects of public display.
But to say the hijab is only about men is to entirely miss the theological core of the practice. As this quote from the Quran plainly states, "I did not create the jinn and mankind except to worship me." Impartially speaking, the source makes it incredibly clear that for a practicing Muslim woman, the ultimate reason for wearing the hijab isn't just about avoiding male attention. At its core, it is fundamentally an act of submission, obedience, and worship to God.
Let's head into Section 4, Nuance, Culture, and the Niqab.
So within the faith, there are actually two major scholarly interpretations regarding the face veil, which is known as the niqab. Interpretation A holds that the face must be completely covered, while Interpretation B maintains that the hijab is entirely acceptable without the face covering. What's absolutely crucial to understand here is that both of these are considered valid differences of opinion among Islamic scholars. The texts leave room for these differing interpretations based on centuries of deep, scholarly study.
Furthermore, the physical execution of modesty actually changes a lot based on geography. Our source gives a really fantastic example of this. Think about it. A brightly colored, vividly patterned hijab might blend in perfectly with the cultural modesty norms in parts of Africa. It wouldn't turn a single head. But take that exact same vibrant outfit and put it on the streets of Saudi Arabia, where black cloaks are the cultural norm. It would stand out drastically. Since the core rule is modesty and not drawing attention, the local culture heavily dictates what the hijab actually looks like in everyday practice. Now you might be wondering, what happens if someone believes in all these rules but really struggles to follow them? Well, the source addresses this head-on with a profound quote from Prophet Muhammad. "Actions are but by intentions, and each person will have but that which he intended." The theology states that if a woman believes the hijab is obligatory but actively chooses not to wear it, it is considered a sin. However, and this is a big however, it also stresses that judgment is strictly between the individual and God. God knows the struggles, the intentions, and the life situations of that person, meaning it is absolutely not the place of others to aggressively judge or force the practice onto someone.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, taking the first step.
For many women, visibly practicing their faith in societies where they might be harshly judged, misunderstood, or even viewed as oppressed is a very, very real fear. It's daunting. So the source offers this really powerful theological reassurance straight from the Quran. Allah does not charge a soul except within its capacity. It's a gentle reminder designed to alleviate that pressure. It acknowledges that while making the step is incredibly difficult and the social anxiety is totally real, God does not give an individual a trial they are entirely incapable of handling.
To actually overcome that paralyzing fear of what will people say, or what if I take it off later, the source recommends 3 highly specific practical steps. Step 1, stop overthinking it and just put the physical hijab on. Step 2, stand and look in the mirror with open hands, fully acknowledging your vulnerability. And Step 3, recite a specific prayer asking God for ease, for the removal of fear from your heart, and for steadfastness. It's this incredibly grounded moment of aligning a physical action with internal spiritual reliance.
So, bringing it all together, according to the source material, the hijab is deeply, fundamentally misunderstood by those outside the faith who view it merely as a restriction. For those who actually practice it, it operates as exactly the opposite. It is framed as a true liberation from toxic, exhausting societal beauty standards, allowing the individual to reclaim their own body from public consumption. It literally transforms the everyday, mundane act of getting dressed into a profound, personal choice of spiritual devotion.
I want to leave you all with this final, really provocative thought derived from our exploration today. We live in an era where appearance so frequently, and often unfairly, determines a person's value. If that is our reality, is true freedom actually found in taking back control and deciding exactly what the world gets to see and what it doesn't? It's a truly fascinating perspective on autonomy and faith. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.